Hi, everyone. So I'm here today with Jessica Attard, who is the portfolio manager of the funding team at Guy's and St Thomas's charity based in London. And we are indeed here for the SRS Expert Series. So welcome, Jessica, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So I think we last saw each other in person back in February, maybe even early March, as part of the CHL workshop in London. Now, obviously, a lot has happened since then. And the world is obviously facing a number of challenges. But what do you see as the biggest challenges facing communities like those in London? And has COVID-19 exacerbated these?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So much has happened since we last saw each other, hasn't it? And I think, generally cities like London are experienced really differently by people, depending on their cultural background and ultimately as well how much money they have in their pocket. Um, and quite often this can lead to health inequity. So, put simply, the poorer you are, the more likely you are to suffer from long term health conditions, the more likely your children are to be overweight. And this gap between the rich and the poor, these health inequalities that coincide, has grown over time, and will likely be exacerbated by the pandemic as the recession bites and unemployment rises. One of the challenges that I think, particularly in urban environments, is that currently the decisions taken by commercial organisations like those in the CGF membership are creating environments that are unhealthy, and companies have really a huge influence on particularly our kind of food options in terms of the availability, the accessibility, and the attractiveness of healthy versus less healthy options. At the moment, particularly in urban areas, children and families are flooded by unhealthy food options, um, and healthy options are much harder to access across the board. And this is despite a really clear market demand, actually, for food that is both healthy and affordable as well as convenient. So, that can have a particularly detrimental effect on families, particularly those in lower income households, who, as I've said, are kind of at this greater risk of poor health. They have less kind of resources to act against this torrent of unhealthy foods that is coming their way. Ultimately, at the charity, we believe that all children have the right to the things that they need to thrive. So that includes nutritious diets. And unhealthy food environments are not only bad for people, bad for the population, but they're increasingly actually becoming bad for companies, bad for profit, bad for economies, and we've seen that playing out throughout the pandemic. So we really want to see organisations stepping up to the plate and supporting better population health.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So, I mean, you've set the scene there very well, but why is it so important for organizations across sectors to work together on issues like health and well-being?
Yeah, so organisations across sectors absolutely need to come together to work on health and well-being. I really strongly believe that no sector is going to kind of crack this on their own, and no sector can make the shifts that we need to see on health and well-being, and particularly issues that are as complex as childhood obesity. Um, the importance of health of families and ultimately the population has been highlighted more acutely as a result of the pandemic. We've seen how ill health, such as high levels of chronic disease and obesity in particular, leads to less resilient populations. It means more people are susceptible to the virus and the economic consequences that will be felt for longer periods of time. And we really want companies to take note of this, because it's not only the right thing to do to support better population health, which it is, of course, the right thing to do, but it also affects their ability to profit and thrive as a business too. So anything that companies can be doing to support population health is ultimately going to support them as companies to be more resilient and prosperous in the longer term too. So we think this is an issue of both ethics and morals, but also of company profit and resilience as well. The causes of poor health are, of course, multifaceted and complex, and closely linked to indices of deprivation like household income and educational attainment. And to break these links, we really need to tackle these kind of ingrained health inequalities. And for that to happen, we need everyone to play their part, and that includes governments, NGOs, and corporates as well. Different sectors, of course, have different assets to bear and to bring to the table, and combining these can lead to greater impact. We've seen, particularly through our work with the Collaboration for Healthier Lives, that solutions don't need to be complex. And together, we really need to, across different sectors, try lots and lots of solutions all at once and at scale to make the meaningful shift that we need to see.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, I mean, you've already mentioned some things that you feel the consumer goods industry and our members obviously need to pay attention to. But what does Guidance and Thomas's charity believe the priorities should be?
So we think there's really two priorities for the consumer goods industry. Um, the first one is that we want all food companies to decouple their sales growth from the sales of unhealthy products. So to do this, we think they'll need comprehensive health strategies that cut across and align the whole business around health, from reformulation and in-store tactics that shift sales towards healthier options, right through to responsible marketing practice, and ensuring internal governance mechanisms are in place to drive and incentivize progress. So we saw in the Collaboration for Healthier Lives intervention in the UK that sometimes companies, different departments within companies, weren't always aligned. So having those cross-company health strategies and incentivizing all departments to prioritize health is really critical for progress. And alongside this, we want to see companies disclosing more, disclosing their activity against the ATNI and Share Action Index that's been published. To support this, this decoupling of sales growth from the sales of unhealthy products, we'd like to see more companies joining the Collaboration for Healthier Lives, and for the trials that have been shown to be successful to be scaled up. And we'd also like to invite companies to support healthier challenger brands that are able to offer both health as well as convenience and affordability. And we've actually set up a fund called the Good Food Fund, which is aiming to support new kind of challenger brands who are meeting that need. And my colleague Matt Towner will be in part of a session during the Sustainable Retail Summit called The Real Challengers. So you'll be able to hear more from him in that Real Challengers session on the 15th. And secondly, we think there's also a really important role for regulation here too. So consumers consistently tell us they want help to find the healthier options. And interestingly, investors are increasingly wanting to invest in consumer goods companies that are protecting themselves from future regulation and really capitalizing on the opportunities that there are to develop a healthier offering. So this year, I'd really love to see companies being brave and bold and calling very loudly for greater regulation of the sector. This is something that we often heard companies talking about within the Collaboration for Healthier Lives, the need for greater regulation, the need to set an even playing field. And so I think there's a really critical role that the Consumer Goods Forum could play in this, facilitating a joint letter or a joint call from its CEO-led board, calling on government for greater regulation of the industry to help them to go further and faster on health.
Excellent, thank you. So, some very concrete asks there. But I guess my next question is how, and perhaps with an emphasis on why, Why has Guys and St Thomas's Charity got involved in the Consumer Goods Forum's Collaboration for Healthier Lives UK initiative?
So ultimately, we at the charity believe that all children have the right to nutritious diets, and that food companies have a really big role to play in that, in helping consumers to stay healthy by making the healthier options the easier option. So we were introduced to this group of retailers and manufacturers, and we're so excited by the prospect of them kind of coming together around a joint goal. And I think particularly this idea that companies who are perhaps more traditionally familiar with competing with one another are really coming together around this shared goal of health. And so we thought this was both exciting, but also that we could help and support the collaboration by bringing in evidence from our child obesity program. So we helped the group by identifying which types of interventions could be most likely to work, and therefore informing which trials they deployed locally. And we also help the companies to understand the day-to-day challenges of some of their customers in store, and the challenges that those people face in trying to purchase healthy food to feed their family. And that sometimes when they enter into store, they can be kind of flooded by opportunities to purchase unhealthy products. So we wanted to work with the group to try and shift that and to try and make those healthier options more accessible, affordable, and attractive.
Okay, great. So CHL UK has been going for just over a year now, and I know we have the progress report coming out very soon at SRS, actually. And I know you guys have been helping us with that, so thank you very much. But in your own words, is CHL UK helping? Have you learned anything from working with the private sector?
I've learned absolutely loads, Lee. So I think really it's been such an interesting journey, and I know that everyone within that group has, I think, genuinely really wants to improve the health of their consumers and support population health. And I think they all absolutely get that they, as food companies, have a role to play and are able to influence the diets of consumers. I think in terms of my experience with the group, I'd say there's glimmers of hope, glimmers of light, that indicate that CHL UK is helping to make consumer baskets healthier. So we've seen through the group that there's a multitude of ways that companies can support the healthy diets of their consumers. And we've seen some evidence of successful trials by members of the group, which is brilliant to see. I think what I've kind of taken away is that it is absolutely both practical and possible for food companies to influence consumer purchasing towards healthier options. These trials have shown positive impact on health, and that can go hand in hand with profit. They don't need to sacrifice each other. So, but what I will say though is that lots more interventions and at a much greater scale are required to really turn the tide on obesity. So I think we've seen progress, definite progress, but want to see the group really stepping up a gear in this next phase. There's been two kind of main takeaways for me being part of the group. And one is the need for food companies to set cross-cutting health strategies and targets that all of the departments within those companies are committed to and incentivized to perform against. At the moment, it is too much of an uphill battle for colleagues, for nutrition colleagues, for health colleagues to get trials off the ground. There's too much pushback from other departments whose priority health is not. at the moment. And the second takeaway for me is, again, as I've mentioned previously, this need for regulation. It's so important for setting the level playing field that companies need to go further and faster. And this next year, I'd really like to see the CHL group coming together to make public CEO-led calls to government for greater regulation.
Thank you. So you mentioned earlier that Guy's and St Thomas's charity will be presenting at the Sustainable Retail Summit on the 15th of October, which is great. And obviously, you've been involved in that event for, I think, the last couple of years, I believe. So why does this event interest you?
I think any event where there's a large number of the companies that ultimately we think can have a huge impact on consumer health are coming together is of course of interest to us. I think getting in front of the senior leaders of the industry and in a space where they're perhaps more open to kind of hearing ideas, hearing challenge, hearing innovations, I think can be really powerful. So as a kind of NGO, we're always trying to look for ways of working with, supporting, pushing to go further these industries, particularly kind of food companies themselves. And we see such opportunity actually for greater cross-sector collaboration and kind of private-public partnerships to support health.
Excellent, thank you. So we know there'll be a number of health-related presentations at SRS. As it is every year, health is very much high on the agenda. But just summarising as best as you can, what key takeaways do you hope our SRS delegates take away with them as far as the health agenda goes?
So I'd really like companies to come away from the SRS being absolutely crystal clear about their ability to shift consumer purchasing toward healthier baskets. And that does not need to be at the detriment to their profits. We've seen that through our CHL trials. I'd like senior leaders to lead with an action to develop company-wide health strategies that aim to decouple sales growth from the sales of unhealthy products, include quantitative targets in these strategies, and to publish and report on these on a regular basis. I'd also like leaders to recognise their role in not only responding to regulation, but also in calling for it. During this turbulent time of the pandemic, there's so much kind of opportunity to build back better. Leaders have an opportunity to shift the whole industry in a positive direction through greater regulation. They have an opportunity to leave a lasting and positive legacy, which can support their own families and generations to come to live healthier lives.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Jessica. As always, it's an enormous pleasure talking with you. And I look forward to seeing you at the SRS in October. So thank you again.
Thanks, Lee.